Welcome back. We're discussing the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion, and joining me again is Adam Zivo. And Adam, unlike the rest of us who are thousands of miles away, who this war seems so distant to us, you are actually there on the ground pretty much since day one, and really are observing what's happening there. Um, Before we went to commercial break, we were discussing how Ukraine has been like asking, really begging for a lot of support in terms of military aid. I know the fighter jets, really the F-16s. This has been a contentious topic. Um, some people feel that if the U.S. sends these fighter jets over, that'll just provoke a larger and more escalated war. Some suggest that it won't even withstand the Russian air defense systems. What is your take on that, given that you're on the ground and you see what's going on firsthand?
I think that a lot of Western policymakers don't have a strong understanding of the politics of the region, and they don't understand that with Russia, uh, provocation comes from weakness. Russia acts more aggressively when it feels that its enemies are weak and will just roll over. And we saw that in 2008 in response to Georgia. We saw that in 2014 in response to Russia's first incursions in Ukraine. I think also sometimes there's been a reluctance to provide aid to Ukraine because people don't understand how little money has actually been provided. So people hear billions of dollars, and that sounds like a lot, but I crunched the numbers. And for example, the United States has only sent over approximately 5% of its annual defense budget. And what has it got in return for that? It's managed to cripple one of its main geopolitical adversaries, reducing Russia's military capacity by 50%. We hear about investment from Canada. We hear once again billions of dollars. But when you look in the context of our annual government expenditures, it's equal to less than 1% of our annual federal budget and much less than 1% of our annual GDP. So I think sometimes there's a lack of financial literacy and people don't put these numbers into context. And so they're less willing to provide money that is not a big amount overall, and they don't understand what they're getting from a self-interested perspective for that investment.
Well, I think that's a fair point. The average Canadian, they know they're struggling with inflation, with the cost of living, and then when they hear there are billions being sent over to a faraway country they probably have never been to, their ears perk up and they're concerned. But you're right, when you look at those numbers vis-a-vis a defense budget, it might seem quite small. Um, do you feel that Canada has a good handle on the geopolitical situation? I don't want to talk about the U.S. right now, but Canada. Are we understanding really what's going on there?
To a certain degree, I think one thing that we tend to overlook is Arctic security and how that might be impacted in the long term by an alliance between Russia and China. We know that as the world gets a bit, warmer, we're going to have more shipping lanes open up in the Canadian Arctic, which will then incentivize many of our main adversaries, predominantly Russia and China, to incur into that space. So there's been a major push for us to secure our north. Um, Now, if you look at things in the long term, it's really within our interest to cripple Russia militarily to ensure that it doesn't engage in any of these incursions in the north or to help China incur in our north. So I think that that angle, that self-interested angle, has really been lost. I think that Canadians also forget that this is a war that could easily escalate should Ukraine lose,
Mm,
because Ukraine, in a way, is a victim of its own success. The Ukrainians, by being able to quarantine the Russians to just, its east and southern territories, has given the impression that it's just a battle of a few small, obscure towns that no one can find on a map or even pronounce if you're from the West. Um, but should Russia be able to break through Ukrainian lines and start to get towards Kiev, Poland has very strongly signaled that it would probably intercede and send its own troops into Ukraine because Poland perceives this as being like the Polish believe that they would be next in line,
right.
essentially. And the Polish perspective is why wait for Russia to regroup? We need to send in our troops now while there's still weekend, while Ukrainians can still fight. And the moment Poland gets involved, that means Czechia is going to get involved. That means the Baltic states are going to get involved, and you'll have a continent-wide war. And if you think inflation is bad now, just imagine when you have something like this.
Well, and I think a lot of folks in the European Union, residents living who relied on, I guess, cheap Russian gas, saw that it really went through the roof this past winter when it was expensive to heat their homes. You mentioned Poland. We only have about 30 seconds. Poland, I think they're on the precipice of their next elections. Do you think this issue will feature widely in the election? Do you think if there's a change in government, we might see a different reaction, which, like you said, could precipitate a more global response here in Ukraine?
Well, I think right now the political winds in Poland are very strongly supportive of Ukraine. That's been one of the most popular policies of the current government. And you see a significant increase in military spending. I think they're trying to aim for 4 or 5% of GDP, though I've forgotten the exact numbers.
Okay.
So if anything, I just see Poland's getting more invested.
Okay, we'll be right back.